Good. The family have asked me to try and corral you lot, so please be corralled. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Jeff Hopkins. I was at school with John and Duncan. Rather more successfully, I was in the pub quiz team with Aileen and Aileen. And on behalf of the family, thank you, welcome, and wow. There's a lot of you. Herman once described himself and Aileen to me as social butterflies, but I had no idea that they had flitted and pollinated quite as far as they had, but fortunately we had the room at the back.
Right, well I'm going to bring a beer with me because that's was generally quite a hard act to follow. Yeah, I know loss is not unique, but I must admit to myself and our family, I think it does feel slightly unique at the moment. But before I get started on my stuff, I just want to say thanks to my wife, Kath, who put that whole thing together. I've seen it a number of times. I've seen it a number of times and it doesn't get much easier, but it is what it is. Yeah, they say the measure of a person's life is not so much about what they've personally achieved, but rather the quantity and the quality of the people's lives they've personally enhanced. And the fact that there are so many people here today bears testimony to a full life, a life well lived, and for that the family takes much comfort. Before I start, I just heard Scott. We're patching into Edinburgh, but what we've told them is if it goes down, we're carrying on. We're just keeping on going. Okay. So, before I start, just like to extend some thanks to those who have assisted over the last few months, to all Mum's friends who have made a special effort and consistent effort to go and visit. Thank you so much. It was so very much appreciated and brightened her day. To my sisters who flew over from New Zealand and England at a moment's notice, thank you for your help in setting up her room, making her comfortable and generally assisting in streamlining the daily process. They would have loved to have been here today, but it was a family decision. We sat down and we talked about it, that they would not return for this short ceremony. In fact, hopefully we'll be back on. My sister Jenny is busy coordinating an event, as Jeff had said, about in Edinburgh as we speak, and hopefully we'll stream into them as we go. To John, who shouldered a huge portion of the initial structuring and has been a constant support, thank you. And then finally to my father, Dad, who's had his world turned upside down in a short space of time. You've adapted amazingly well. And let's be perfectly frank, adaptability isn't what I would have picked of you, not just because you're 83, but basically adaptability isn't your strongest suit. But you've adapted amazingly. And finally, to Leila and to Berenice, who are here today, they were Mom's carers over the last month when she was in frail care. They showed unbelievable empathy and support and made the last month as bearable as possible. So a special thank you goes out to the two of you, and I can see them sitting down there. So thanks very much for that. It's strange to think that when Mom was diagnosed with the illness, I was in the throes of busy putting together a short speech for their 50th wedding anniversary, which was basically in a week's time, just over a week's time. And the more I've thought about it, the more the gist of that speech is still very relevant to today. Mom would probably have shaken her head as I started off the speech by talking about 1976, when my brother and I were abandoned on an overseas trip, when Mom, Dad, Margie and Jen went across to Holland while John and I remained in England. Not this again, she would have said as she shook her head. But that's exactly what I was looking for. I was looking for her to shake her head, but then to turn around and go, to highlight how my parents, and my mom in particular, developed and encouraged independent children, with the ability to fend for themselves and with the interest in spreading their wings. She was very proud of the way her children and grandchildren were forging their way in the world and developing their own sense of purpose and sense of being. And I'm sure she would have been very happy to see how the four siblings had pulled together when it was really required over the last few months. This independence was of course no surprise, as she did exactly the same thing herself. She worked her way down from Scotland at a very young age and forged a whole new life for herself halfway across the world, but without ever forgetting where she came from. Her ties to Scotland were still very strong, much like her accent. Should we be sad? Of course we should be. But let's also acknowledge that this is a life well lived, and a life worth celebrating. Not a life without its challenges, but then who has one of those? But a life full of opportunity and full of adventures. Mom was fortunate in that she had the ability to realize these opportunities, and she was well-travelled. She was very well-travelled. As far as memory serves, I recall South America, North America, Europe extensively, Australia, New Zealand, Indonesia, cruising in the Mediterranean and Scandinavia, sailing to St. Helena, and all this whilst raising 4 children under the age of 5.5 years. We battle with 2 now. Quite a feat. Mom was tough. If she believed in something, it was difficult, if not impossible, to turn her. I always used to think of Margaret Thatcher and this lady's not for turning. I'm sure we all have examples of those running through our minds, but more often than not, she was right, and she normally was. But she had a soft side too, and really came to the fore and showed a real mettle in times of real family emergency, noticeably with the sudden and untimely deaths of Henrik and Justin. I'm sure Jen will join me in celebrating and thanking Mom for the great care and empathy she showed in these times, her true nursing roots coming through. We can also thank her for driving many of us to take up music and to take up sports. For those of us who played sports slightly longer than you, John, we can also thank her for the prospect of creaky and troublesome knees, elbows and shoulders, just like she had. And she loved her friends and loved visiting people. I remember an epic trip to visit Margie in Durban, taking her Graaf Renette, Colesberg, Mooi River, Durban, and then all the way back along the N2 and the garden route, all in the ever-present Valiant station wagon, for those who remember the Valiant station wagon. Actually, on that trip, we pretty much replaced the entire Valiant station wagon as we repaired it as we go. We did many of those trips. Finally, there was a sense of family, and the interest she took in her children and her grandchildren. From the early family holidays to the series Pine Forest, to the many trips across to New Zealand, and of course she was always available to help Jen on what seemed like her annual exercise of moving house in the UK. She was an active participant in the lives of her children and grandchildren, not just in South Africa, but also overseas. And this closeness of family will sustain us, and will sustain Dad too, as we turn our attention to caring for you, Dad. So let's feel sad, let's feel a sense of loss. Let's acknowledge that we will miss Mom dearly, but let's also not fool ourselves that this was a life wasted. This was a life well lived, a life full of interest and endeavour, and celebrate that. And that is the message I will carry with me, a message of celebration for a full life, and hope that you all will carry that message too. You're dearly loved, Mom, and you're missed already more than you think.
I've known Aileen literally all of my life because she was my mom. She was caring, she was loving, she was supportive. I remember the 1981 Springbok tour to New Zealand, where Duncan and I would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to watch the rugby, and Mom would have put hot chocolates in a flask with some tennis biscuits waiting for us in front of the television. She was the one I turned to in a crisis, when I needed sage advice, when I needed a chat, because she was my mom. She was complex, strong-willed, exasperating at times, but then she was my mom after all. Whenever I was sick, she would call or visit every single day. She was at the birth of our first child and gave us the most immeasurable support. Emily simply adored her and spent many a happy afternoon with her gran-gran. Scott, unfortunately, will never know his gran. But I will make sure that they're both told regular stories and that the lessons that she taught me gets passed on to them. My earliest memories of my mother, and that of a number of my friends, a couple of them I see here today, is of peeling potatoes for chips for supper, something that I and they got plenty of practice at. She instilled a lifelong love of cooking in me, and her golden rule of cooking that you can always add, but you can never take away, has become my cooking mantra. She shared my timekeeping tendencies and would often tell me that nobody's ever missed a flight by getting to the airport too early. I inherited my slight obsession with planning from her, with both of us being quite comfortable discussing the Christmas dinner menu in March. I'll miss her every day. She was my mom.
Good afternoon, everybody. When I first heard that we were holding a celebration for Mum, I must say I felt a bit strange about the word. I didn't feel like celebrating anything at all. I was feeling miserable, I was feeling heartbroken, and I was pretty sure that there were a lot of people that would feel the same way as I did. So I sat down and I wrote some words about how I was feeling, how miserable I was, how heartbroken, how frustrated I was that she was gone. And then I reread the words, and I realized that everything that I had written didn't actually say anything about how I felt about Mum, or that actually resonated with who she was. She was a happy person, she was a positive person, her glass was always half full, she was upbeat, almost like a Duracell battery, and none of us could be left behind in what was the positivity and the energy that was the force of her life. Some tried. Think about Herman and Scottish dancing. Dad, it wasn't long before Mum had you up on your dancing feet. And then I thought about all the events that she'd organised, both here at Woodside Village and also with her friends and her family, and how supported she was with all of those events, and how supported she made us feel at events. They weren't events, they were grand events and positive, happy, upbeat events. And I realised then, for her, every day was celebrated. She celebrated every day of her life. She lived with a fierce commitment to things and a fierce being and presence in this world. And I think that her experiences had shown her that love and family and being present was a celebration in itself. And so then I started to feel a little bit better about this word celebrate, because today we are going to celebrate how much Mum meant to us and how much she gave to us, not just to us but to everyone around us in this room and also many beyond this room. She touched lives, she taught, she shared, she gave us knowledge, she gave us skills. She gave to everyone who asked, and she even gave to some people who didn't ask her for her help. Mum, we cry today because you are gone, but we smile because you did live. And in living, you gave us life, but you gave us so much more than that. You and us can now look at the next generation and feel really comforted knowing that everything that you were and that you gave us, we are now passing on and passing down. You are never going to be forgotten. What you stood for, what you lived for, is going to carry on, both now and in the future. And you and what you did will never, ever be forgotten. We love you, Mum, and we thank you for all you gave us. Rest well.
My mum, it feels quite surreal to believe that you are gone. My mother has always been a constant in my life, and my life has emulated hers in more ways than I could ever have imagined. I think a psychologist would probably have a field day with that. I have brought my children up very similarly, and I so often hear her words coming out of my mouth, and all my siblings will identify with this one. A common one now is, "Your room is like a pigsty." I have 3 teenagers, need I say more? And another one that my siblings will well remember is, "I talk until I'm blue in the face and no one listens to me." And, well, I apologized to her personally once my 3 hit the teens. I said, "Mum, I get it now. You only truly appreciate your mother, I think, as you get older and as your own children get older." And then she's gone. It's too soon, really is too soon, but she is gone. She was such a dynamic, vibrant, loving presence in all of our lives. As we were growing up, she was loving but strict, but she was always there for us. I remember her attending every single water polo game that we did with her flask of hot chocolate, and I remember sitting cuddled up next to her after the game trying to warm up, drinking our hot chocolate and just knowing that she was always going to be there. We often joked, we had a sort of a thing that we used to say as kids, like, "Oh, you had 4 children so you could have 4 slaves." Well, we worked hard, but she did us no harm. In fact, she did us a lot of good. Because when Jen and I were sitting there in June, when we were there looking after Mum, and we were looking through the photo albums and having some amazing memories and looking at them, we were absolutely amazed at how young we were and the things that we were doing. 2, 3 years old, grating cheese, slicing tomatoes. She never mollycoddled us. She brought us up to be self-sufficient, independent young people, and she did it. All 4 of us siblings are exactly that. We run successful businesses. I'm bringing up my children in exactly the same way, and I know my siblings are too, so that these kids can get out there and show the world what they can do. And this is what she brought us up to do. My kids are doing the same. They're doing part-time jobs. They can pretty much run a household, and they've been doing it for ages. And that is all thanks to Mum. I would never have believed as a child that I would have chosen the same fulfilling career that she did. And midwifery has just been something that she and I could always connect with on the same level, because it was just something that we just absolutely loved and were passionate about. She was such an inspiration to me, and the effort that she made to always stay in contact. I left home at the age of 19, and we were phoning, we were talking. In the olden days, we were writing all the time. I would look back through all the letters that I wrote when I was nursing. And sort of just the support that she always had there, that she was just wonderful. When Keith and I did our look-see of coming over to Australia and New Zealand, she came up and looked after all three of the children. She was a fantastic granny to them. She would get down to their level. She would talk to them, play games with them. Board games are an absolute granny thing. Everybody would know that that's what it was. She would read them stories. When Keith and I moved with the kids to New Zealand, she and Dad had been over 3 times to see us, and the Skype conversations, I used to value them and look forward to them. 2-3 times a week we'd be talking on Skype and just sitting and chatting. She was always there for comfort, guidance, advice. She was just there, and now she's not. But even though her body is not here, I feel her spirit. I know she is still with us, and she's definitely still with me. And Mum, you will be sorely missed, and you are very, very, very deeply loved. And I wish you well on your next journey, and I'm just thrilled and privileged that I was your daughter and that you were my mum. Thanks.
My wife Dom and I have known Herman and Aileen for over 50 years. I knew them before they were married, and we were at their wedding. And we've shared all the big events of life for the last 50 years. Christmases, Easter, all the big events we've shared. So Aileen's passing, there was a very great gap in our lives, someone we will always treasure and remember. And asked me a very great privilege of reading a eulogy which he's written for Aileen. And it's my very great privilege to read it now. And I hope I can do justice to Herman and to Aileen. We have come together to celebrate Aileen's life and recall what she has meant to her family and friends. At Aileen's 50th birthday, a quarter century ago, I listed her attributes as follows: common sense, non-flappability, knowledgeability, organizational ability, speed of action, the ability to carry 3 pairs of glasses on her neck at the same time, all sense, helpfulness, inability to suffer fools gladly, culinary ability, and episodic missionary zeal for house reorganization. I will mention some of the aspects of her remarkable personality which all who knew her will remember. Aileen and I met more than 50 years ago in the theatre of the maternity block at Pritzker Hospital. She was the sister assisting me doing a caesarean section, the best midwifery sister I ever worked with. We got engaged in London, and on her return to Cape Town, Aileen joined me staying with my parents. Some here may remember that in those days we had a quaint custom. Until you were married, you slept in separate rooms. Her common sense was amply demonstrated when I was unable to unscrew the glass around a blown bulb. Aileen turned the cover the other way and it came off easily. An example of Aileen's helpfulness was the way she dropped everything and flew to the UK to help Jennifer move house. And anyone who knows Jennifer knows how she likes to move house. And she would do the same for any friend. Aileen was very careful about spending money. It took the boys years to convince her, against her better Scottish judgment, that the extra cost in 2-ply toilet paper was worth it. Yet despite this, she arranged the most successful trip to 8 Bells for 20 family members and friends. We were there. Another time she arranged a cruise to Madagascar for the same number. Aileen and I were both very keen on teaching midwives. In 1979, we started the Continuing Perinatal Education Programme, which we presented throughout the Cape Province. When we moved to Woodside Village, we took over the publication of the Woodsider. Aileen did the vast majority of the work, choosing interesting articles, finding appropriate pictures, and formatting the 24-page issues. Another of her endeavours was starting a theatre club, which was most popular Woodsiders. We loved playing bridge together, and Aileen presented a number of quizzes for the Woodsiders, and so I could go on about Aileen's involvement in life at Woodside. Aileen raised her children, our children, to be as helpful to family and friends as she was. Thus, at very short notice, Margaret and Jennifer came over from New Zealand and the UK respectively. And as soon as they heard of her illness, immediately got Aileen set up in frail care. They worked non-stop until they were satisfied that their mother was as comfortable as possible, just as she would have done for them. John and Duncan joined me in enjoying our daily happy hour with Aileen in her room. Together with Kirsty and Kathy, they've organised this celebration and all the matters needing attention. For that I'm eternally grateful. The attendance at this celebration is a tremendous and a testament to the impact that Aileen had on so many lives. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to end with telling you what I shall be missing. I will miss having Aileen around after more than 50 years together. I will miss all the things we did together and her superb cooking for her superbly organised parties. I will miss her deeply. But this is a celebration of Aileen's life. So I just end by saying, farewell, dearest wife.